I'm a 9th grader in a school at a small town. Our town's so small that we have all the students go to the same school, so it's a kindergarten through 12th grade system, and you have 6-year-olds and 18-year-olds walking through the same hallways to their classes. Some of our grades only have a few students, while others have a ton, because sometimes families move into town around the same time and create these kind of waves in the population. I was a kid from one of those waves. I only moved here a couple of years ago, but it hasn't been too hard making friends. Anyways, I was hanging out with the first 2 friends I made, Bill and Rex, smoking weed on the bleachers in front of the football stadium at around 8 p.m. They were both a year older than me, and they'd been in the town since they were kids, so they knew all the good spots to hang out and all the crazy stories that happened in this town, which there's a lot of. One of the first things they taught me is about a man called the mayor, even though he isn't really the mayor. I think he's probably a homeless guy, and maybe he's crazy, based on how people talk about him. Anyways, you're supposed to stay away from him, because my friends told me a story about how one time, a kid went to talk to him, and then he went missing right after. Anyways, while we were smoking on the bleachers, my friends told me about how around a decade ago, the school's marching band went missing. Up until that point, this school was really invested in its marching band, even though they never actually competed against any other schools because they didn't want to gather the funding for bus rides and whatever. But one year, when they were supposed to be wrapping up practice on the field we were sitting right in front of right now, they just disappeared. The coaches, students, even the instruments. Parents waited, and their kids never came home. People went out to check, and it was like they were never there. The town hasn't had a marching band since. Apparently people go missing in this town a lot. I guess it's why the population's so small even though people keep moving in. Hearing this story was probably the most creeped out I'd felt since I moved here, at least until what happened around 15 minutes later. We were wrapping up our smoke session and getting ready to head back home for the night, since it was getting dark, when we heard some rustling out in the forest just past the bleachers. We panicked and threw all our stuff in our bags since we thought we were about to get caught. But then, the rustling stopped. I looked to where we heard the sounds, and it looked like a man was standing there, watching us.
"Come here,"
we heard him shout.
"We need to talk."
One of my friends ran away, but I could tell that from where he was standing, the man could probably see who we were, so I swore to myself and stood up, and my other friend did the same. We were walking over to him as he kept yelling something I couldn't understand, when I noticed something. The man was wearing a top hat, and he looked oddly skinny, but not like a normal kind of malnourished skinny. More like he was literally squeezed down from the side so his ribcage was flattened and pushing out from his middle. "Dude," I said to my friend, "who is that?" My friend looked up and shouted, "Shit, it's the mayor, run!" I still didn't really understand why, but I ran. I have a feeling that might have been one of the last moments of my life if I didn't notice who the man was when I did. He didn't chase us, he just stood there, mumbling to himself as we ran back towards the middle of the football field. I was so focused on running that I didn't notice there was music playing. When I looked up, I realized we'd finished smoking just in time before a marching band performance. There was a group of players, all totally dressed up in uniforms, playing a song that sounded oddly distant and walking around to different well-choreographed positions. The way the sunlight reflected off them, it looked like they were almost in the middle of an earthquake, shaking up and down like a malfunctioning reel from an old film. I don't know how to describe it, since I only saw them up close for a few moments. My friend shouted that we had to warn them, so we ran to the group to tell them that the mayor was here. I didn't notice until we were almost face to face with them that these didn't look like grade schoolers. It was a marching band of grown men, and they weren't wearing our school colors. Suddenly, the ground collapsed beneath us. None of the marchers fell down with us, but me and my friend fell around a meter down into a soggy area of the field that had suddenly had a cave-in. There was a horrible, sweet, rotting smell surrounding us. When I finally was able to collect myself and check that I wasn't hurt, I realized where the smell was coming from. We were surrounded by people, their flesh peeling, melting off their bones, mostly skeletons, wearing marching band uniforms. Our marching band uniforms. Instruments poked out from the dirt, Little rocks and worms ate into the corpse's bony fingers. Sorry for the detail, but I threw up pretty much instantly. The music kept playing until my friend and I started getting up. My friend and I were okay. We were able to climb out without our feet crushing into anyone's torso, and the mayor and the band were all gone. We told the school what happened, minus the smoking, and the field was fixed the next day. They didn't answer any of our questions about the bodies or the grown-up marching band that we saw. They pretty much acted like none of it ever happened. I've told people this story and they don't really believe me. The only part they seem to believe is the part with the grown-up marching band. Apparently, this isn't the first time people have seen them. Some people believe they're a group of spirits, playing a song to honor the lives of all those students that were mysteriously lost that day. I don't know what I believe, but I have a feeling they were there that day to warn us, and that they were trying to stand in our way so we wouldn't run into the pit that we fell into. And who knows, maybe the mayor was trying to warn us too. People go missing a lot in True. I'm writing this story because I'm tired of it, and I want some attention to be drawn to it because it feels like nothing's changing. I've lived here since I was a kid. It's a decent town with some good people. My parents moved here for the community, and I got stuck with it, but that's alright because I like it here. At least, I used to. One of my best friends went missing 2 weeks ago. His name was George Patton. I think I was one of the last people to see him. We walked home from the school along the same path every day, and there was a specific point where we would split off and walk off to our own houses, and that's the last time I saw him. I'm in 10th grade, and I'm not that great at making friends. Most of the friends I had, I just knew because of George. So when he went missing, it just felt awkward hanging around them. I ended up hanging around one of the newer kids, and even though we didn't have a lot in common, it made it a little easier getting through those days when I wasn't really sure whether I'd ever see George again. Alright, so I was hanging out with this kid when he mentioned that he noticed a guy living under a bridge. Obviously that probably doesn't sound that crazy, but this is a really small town and I'd never seen that before personally. I don't think there had ever been a person in True that wasn't living there, like in a house. So it's kind of messed up, but we pretty much immediately decided we had to go check it out and see it for ourselves. So after school that day, I started walking down, following my friend to see this bridge. Slowly, as we walked, I realized that we were following the exact path that me and George used to take to walk home. I mentioned this to my friend, but he kind of shrugged and we moved on. We were coming up to the point where me and George would split off and go in different directions, when my friend said that we were going to take a right, down the way that George would go. My heart was starting to race, and my palms were getting sweaty. It felt weird following down the same path that my friend took probably before whatever happened. The longer we walked along this path, the more it lined up with the path George took. We were getting to the point where we'd be at his house in just around 5 minutes. Pretty soon we arrived at the bridge my friend was talking about. George would have walked right over it hundreds of times on his way to and from school. We started whispering about whether the guy was under there. My friend decided we should throw a rock and see if we hear anything, so we did. Nothing happened. My friend, who was braver than me, started slowly creeping over to the side of the bridge to see if he could see under it. Eventually he came running back and said that he saw a little peek of someone hiding. Now I was getting pretty nervous. What if whoever down there was the person that took George? Even though this was how I felt, I didn't tell my friend. I didn't want to make him think that I was scared, and I hadn't really mentioned George that much because I didn't want him to think that I was just thinking about it all the time. He left to peek again and came back frantically whispering, "There's totally someone down there. I saw them moving." I said that maybe we should leave, but my friend shook his head. "No, it's your turn. I already peeked twice." I tried to make excuses saying I wasn't feeling good, but he wasn't buying it, and I couldn't really think of a good, convincing reason. So eventually I gave up and started creeping over. My friend was right. I could see someone down there, lying down and facing away from me towards the bridge. I got a little closer, comforted that they couldn't see me, and saw that they were moving. My heart was racing. I wanted to call the police to tell them to investigate, but I decided I had to see for myself if this was really someone to be worried about. As I got closer, I noticed something beige was wrapped around this person and slowly realized that it was a rope. There was something white around their head too, and their shoes, which I could finally see, were lime green sneakers. The exact kind of sneakers that George wore. My heart sank. Whoever this was, they were wearing George's sneakers. There was no way it wasn't the man who made him go missing. I started running back to my friend, and I was about to shout that he should run too before this man caught us when I heard a muffled mumbling coming from under the bridge. It sounded like there was something in this man's mouth. My first thought was that he was eating George, as horrible as that is. But then I remembered the white around their head. It was right around the mouth level, so it was possible that it was actually a gag. Nervously, I called out, "George?" The mumbling got louder. It sounded like crying. It was him. I ran back onto the bridge and turned around and saw that it was actually George, with a gag in his mouth, tied up with a rope and stuck in a spot where it would have been impossible for him to roll out. I untied him and everything. His face was covered in scratches and mud, but he wasn't really hurt physically. Apparently, some man had come out from the bridge and grabbed him, and he left him there tied up under the bridge for 2 weeks, only coming back every couple of days to give him food and water before leaving again. The police never found the man that did it, and I'm not even really sure if they really investigated. And people are still going missing. They've been going missing for a long time now. I'm so glad that George lived, but not everybody comes back like he did, so please, someone, come to True and help us, because anybody could be next. Nobody in this town would believe anything that I'm about to say, mostly because they don't believe anything I say at all. I think you could technically call me a cat lady, even though I only have one cat, but I'm so obsessed with this cat that I think it annoys people because I won't shut up about her. I don't have a lot of friends. Sorry, I'm not going to talk about my cat this whole time. This is about something really freaky I went through recently. So, to start with, I think my school is haunted. I'm in middle school, another reason why people don't listen to me since nobody listens to middle schoolers these days, but I've lived in this town and gone to this school basically my whole life. It's a pretty good school, I guess. We have a chess club that I'm not in, and we also have a theater club, which I am in because I'm kind of a thespian, at least a little. I'm thespish. So, one day, after a theater rehearsal, I had to run back to the school to get my backpack that I left in one of the theater seats. My face was still painted gold because I played the doorknob in Alice in Wonderland, and it was pretty itchy, so I was getting gold paint all over my fingernails from scratching it too. Basically, I wanted to get home as fast as possible, so I was running at top speed all the way to school, and I was totally out of breath by the time I got there. From the moment I got into the theater, I had this prickly feeling on the back of my neck like I wasn't alone in there. I spent a lot of time in this place, and I was used to what it sounded like, with the air conditioning rumbling and the breeze coming in from the exit door, but this sounded different. It was hard to place. I walked over to my backpack, hoping I could get out of there as quickly as I could without having whoever was in there see me with this paint on my face. And I was walking down the aisle between the theater chairs when I heard a metal creaking above me like footsteps. We have something called a catwalk in our theater, which is basically a long, skinny metal pathway above all the seats where people go if they want to work on the lights above our theater and stuff. It's also a place where people go to make out sometimes. We're a small town, but we take theater pretty seriously for some reason, so they put a lot of work into it. The footsteps were coming from the catwalk. They were slow and dragging. I thought it could have been a mechanic or someone that had to fix something, but then I heard the sound of a girl whimpering. I picked up my backpack and I started to walk out of the theater as quietly as I could so I didn't bother them. And the farther I walked, the louder the crying got. Just as I was about to leave the theater, the crying stopped. Now, I was feeling bad. This person probably needs someone to talk to, and even though I might not be the best person to do it, thanks to my lack of social skills and golden face, I would be better than no one. So I put my backpack down, turned around, and started to walk back across the stage towards the back where I could climb the stairs to the catwalk. But then, as I looked up to where they would be, I saw something weird happening with the light. It looked like the air itself around the catwalk was shaking, like there was some kind of transparent fog maybe that was rattling back and forth. And then, something fell. I couldn't see the details of who it was, but it looked like a girl wearing all black clothes that almost looked like she was shaking up and down, maybe shivering uncontrollably as she fell, and there was a rope around her neck. I looked away before she reached the point where her neck would snap and she would fall limp forever. Instead, I just ran out of the room and tried to find an adult to help me because I didn't really know what to do or how to help her. When I did find a janitor who ran into the theater to save her, she was gone. We investigated and they never found anything on the catwalk. No rope or anything. Even the door leading up to it was locked. There was no way there was a girl up there when I saw her up there. I didn't get in trouble, though, because I wasn't the first person to see this girl. The thing is, apparently, around 20 years ago, someone actually did hang themselves from that catwalk. It was a boy named Kent Weber. Ever since then, when someone's alone in this theater, sometimes they'll see what I saw. Sometimes they just hear crying, and sometimes they just see the body hanging. And that's why I think this school is haunted. People go missing or die all the time in this town. Around a decade ago, the school's whole marching band disappeared. Someday, I want to figure out what's going on. So I'm never leaving True Town until I do.